There is already set in the plan of God a time and place for you and I to die. We must trust Him with this awesome appointment. Even if we know where we're going, death can be a fearful prospect. Today, we'll learn how to leave the timing in the hands of God and then rely on Him to see us through the gate. Stay with us. From Chicago's Moody Church, this is Running to Win with Dr. Erwin Lutzer, whose clear teaching helps us make it across the finish line. Our current series on Running to Win is all about what happens 1 minute after you die. In this, his final message, Erwin Lutzer discusses the purposes of God in the death of a Christian, when God opens the curtain for you.
There is a fable sometimes told in the Middle East of a servant who is sent to the marketplace by a merchant. The servant was to run an errand, which he did, but when he was there in the marketplace, as he was coming home, he happened to greet Lady Death. When he saw the startled look on his face, the servant was so overcome by fear that he hurried home and he said to his master, "I saw Lady Death in the marketplace, and she startled me." He said, "Please give me your fastest horse so that I can ride all the way to Sumerah tonight." And so the master said, "Go ahead, take my horse and do that." But a little while later, the master actually went to the marketplace himself in the afternoon, and he met Lady Death, and he said, "Why did you startle my servant this morning?" And Lady Death said, "Well, I didn't intend to startle your servant. In fact, it is I who was startled. I couldn't figure out what in the world he was doing in Baghdad this morning when I have an appointment with him in Sumerah tonight." One way or another, death will get to us. Death awaits us as the cement floor awaits the falling light bulb. A man by the name of Tom Howard wrote these words about death. He said, "When we are going to die, when we are face to face, we are like a hen before a cobra, incapable of doing anything in the very presence of the thing that seems to call for the most drastic, decisive action. There is, in fact, nothing we can do, say what we will, dance how we will, and soon enough we will be a ruined heap of feathers and bones, indistinguishable from the rest of the ruins that lie about. It will not appear to matter in the slightest whether we met the enemy with calmness, shrieks, or trumped-up gaiety. There we will be. There we will be. We all have an appointment with death. Whether it's in Chicago or Taipei or some city in Canada or in Europe, we all must die. The fact that we're going to die is as certain as the rising sun. Today's message has to do with the topic of death, but before I get into it, I want to talk a little bit about suicide. We have a great deal of emphasis today on assisted suicide, doctors helping other people die. Here at the Moody Church, we receive phone calls from time to time from people in the city who want to give us the assurance that if they committed suicide, they'd actually go to heaven. We always say to them, first of all, suicide is never a good option. There's always something else that you can do. You should never think that suicide is actually the answer to your predicament. And number two, don't be so overconfident that on the other side things are going to be better than they are here. Remember Shakespeare in that sleep of death, what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil. For many people who are going through times of agony on earth and they think that the only answer is suicide, they will actually find themselves in a realm that is far worse than this life could ever be. Of course, we've all known Christians who have committed suicide. I've known at least 3 or 4, and I fully expect to see them in heaven. But it is presumptuous to think that somehow we can go to heaven before Jesus Christ calls our name and that that's really the right answer to our predicament and to our problem. And so I say to you today that let us all make sure that it is Jesus Christ who calls our name rather than showing up in heaven before He calls our name. Today I want to speak on the providence of God in the death of a Christian. The providence of God in the death of a Christian. It is actually the 7th in a series of messages on the topic 1 minute after you die. And I'd like to emphasize the fact that we as believers must realize that our lives are actually in the hand of God, not the hands of men. All of you remember the story of Scott and Janet Willis, whose van hit that metal back in 1994, and as a result, 6 of their 9 children were killed in the burning vehicle. You remember how when the van erupted in flames, Scott said to his wife, "This is a moment for which we are prepared." And we've had them here at the Moody Church, and they have told our story. Frequently, I have thought about that as you have, and you've probably heard me say that this is surely an example in which the doctrine of God's providence is tested, but after it is tested, it comes out giving us the assurance that those children died within the will of God. Let us say it boldly. Of course, as we think about all of the if-onlys connected with the event, we could make a list of them very, very easily, couldn't we? If only that piece of metal had slithered into the ditch rather than onto the face of the coming van. Or let us suppose also that something else might have happened, such as the band starting out a minute later or a minute earlier. Or the Willis family could have started out a minute earlier or a minute later, and they'd have been in a different place in the highway. What if Scott, when he saw that piece of metal, rather than running over it and allowing it to go in the middle of the van, between the wheels, what if he had decided to run over it with the tires? Perhaps an accident would not have happened, but would have happened, I should say, but as a result, perhaps all of them would have lived. We can take all of those if-onlys, and we need to understand that behind those if-onlys is God. You've heard me refer to Martha and Mary. Remember, Jesus is coming to Jerusalem after Lazarus dies. And Martha runs out and she meets Jesus and said, "If you had been here, my brother had not died." And a few moments later, Mary runs out of the house and says the very same words, "If only you had been here, my brother had not died." If. Let me ask you, have you ever attended a funeral where there are not at least a few if-onlys? If only we